What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbados Walker. I am your host, Andrew, and in this video, I want to talk about the Emancipation Day that just took place in Barbados just a few days ago. If you're watching this video still in August 2026, I just want to talk about it, but nothing special about what actually happened in Barbados a few days ago, but what happened in Barbados many years ago. I'm talking about the famous Bussa's Rebellion. Bussa's Rebellion. Now, if you've lived in Barbados, maybe you just recently came or you have visited before, you might have gone to a place called Sky Mall at Haggart Hall, St. Michael. And you might have noticed a roundabout there with a statue of a man breaking free from chains. Now, originally, when that statue was first commissioned, before I continue, let me just do a little bit of disclaimer here. Obviously, I wasn't alive 200 years ago. Everything I'm saying now is based on research, what is on the internet. And you know that what is on the internet is put by human beings and not the all-knowing Almighty God, which means some of them may get it wrong, some of them may be estimating, approximating, or whatever. And because of that, some of the information that I give you might also be not 100% correct. So, if you are a Barbados historian or you know a little bit about Barbados history and I make a mistake, please do not leave the video just with the mistake floating again, adding to the misinformation on the internet. Comment below. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what the correct thing is, because that is how we all learn on this channel, right? Many of you know that in the past I've said some things and people have told me, actually, it's more like this than that. And I had to go and do my research again. I think the most embarrassing one was when I said Barbados had less than 200,000 people as its population. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever said on this channel. But we live and we learn, okay? So if I say something here and it's not exactly accurate, just know that my source made a I'm going to blame it all on my source. I'm not taking any responsibility. So just know that my source got it wrong and I'm getting it wrong because of them, not my fault. But anyway, to 90% certainty, I can tell you that what I'm about to tell you now is exactly as it happened 200 years ago. I was the cameraman that recorded these events, and you can trust me. Okay? So let's continue. So if you go to IMAT, you see this statue. It was originally called the Emancipation Statue. And that is why during Emancipation Day, there was this nice decoration that was done around the statue, and they had the word Emancipation Day, the words Emancipation Day. I think they put some lights. I saw green light, I saw blue light. It was highlighted. It was nice. It was beautiful. I didn't take any pictures, so just imagine how beautiful it was. But if you haven't been to Barbados, just search Emancipation Statue in Bridgetown or something on the internet, or you can even watch some of my early videos. Any video on this channel that has something about Sky Mall and I'm videoing outside, you will see the statue in that video. My first video, actually, the statue is there. But later on, this statue was nicknamed. I don't think it was ever officially changed, but it was nicknamed the Bussa statue. Bussa, the Bussa statue. Why? Because there is this legend. I've talked about this guy so many times on this channel, but now this is his own video. So I'm going to glaze him even more in this video. There is this legend that has gone down in history as Bussa, right? I Googled and Googled and Googled and Googled, and I never found his real name. I don't even know what it could have been. In fact, I saw somewhere they called him they said that his name is Bussa, but his full name is the Right Excellent Bussa. And I'm like, Right Excellent is a title. It's not a person's full name. Who is writing this stuff? But anyway, so I don't know his full name. I don't think any Barbados person knows his full name either. If you do know his full name, please leave it in the comments. But this guy was actually taken as a slave, right? He was actually taken as a slave from a different part of the world and brought to Barbados. Now, some people say that he was a slave in Jamaica first, and then he was brought to Barbados, but it's very unlikely given that the majority of slave trade came from Africa, right? If you look at the picture that I'm showing you here now, the first picture, this is slave trade from Africa to the Americas from 1650 to 1860, which is around the same time that Bussa was brought to the island. He was brought in the late 1700s, so around this time. And if you look, you see the majority of people are coming from Senegal, Sierra Leone, the Ivory Coast, and West Africa in general, Congo, Angola. And a lot of people, about 10 to 15 million of them, were moved to the West Indies, to South America, to North America. If you look at this other picture, transatlantic slave trade routes, 15th to 19th century, you see it. Millions of people were moved. So if you look at where the arrows are going, they are coming from Africa and they are going to South America, Caribbean parts of the US. And you don't see a lot of movement between the islands, even though that happened, but it wasn't as common. When people were taken, they were usually taken to where they were needed immediately. They were not taken first to one island and then many years later reshuffled to another island. That's not usually what happened. So it's more likely that he was brought from Africa. And in fact, there is reasonable speculation among some historians that he was taken specifically from Nigeria, from among the Igbo people, right? The Igbo tribe in Nigeria, which is a tribe that I'm from, right? And I have done this thing before on this channel, where we actually found out that the word BIM, which is like a nickname for Barbados as a whole, BIM, might have had its origin from the Igbo language, where the people were calling Barbados Ebem, which then got shortened to BEM, which then became BIM. Right? And Ebem means my home or my place. So the idea that some historians have is that when the slaves were brought to Barbados, after a while, they decided that instead of thinking about home and wanting to go back home and reunite with the people, they would try to make this place, this island, their home, and then live here, build here, grow, like have their generations, their children from here. And so they made this place their home, and that might have led to the mindset that then led to the revolt and the revolution, because they felt like they should be treated like equal human beings if they were going to be home, if this was going to be their home, right? But anyway, that's a story for another day. So this man, hypothetically from West Africa, hypothetically from Igbo land, was taken to Barbados. He was taken to Barbados. Now, I was reading another document that said that he was actually first enslaved in Africa, right? And then he was sold as a slave to the Europeans. So he was enslaved in Africa by African merchants, and then those African merchants sold him to European slave traders. And that is how he came to Barbados in the 18th century. This is also consistent with a lot of history that we know from Africa, where there was a lot of slavery going on. And then when the Europeans came to Africa, there were already existing markets, slave markets, and all they had to do was buy already enslaved people. Right? So it's very consistent with what we already know in African history. So it's believably correct. Anyway, none of that matters at this point. What matters is that he's in Barbados now, right? And when he came to Barbados, now he was a slave. After a while, he was put to be in charge of some of the other slaves. So, like there is this head slave who is like a head officer among the. You're still a slave, but you're the slave that they ask to call the other slaves, right? Something like that. And the term, I think, was called ranger. So he was a ranger on Bailey's plantation. This was a parish in St. Philip around the time of the rebellion. And during that time, there was this move that the British people were having where they were discussing, I think they were discussing moving slaves from one part of the Caribbean to the other. And then they were trying to figure out all the logistics or something like that. The entire details are not very clear to me, but they had a meeting. That's the most important part. They had a meeting. And during these discussions, some of the slaves in Barbados got the idea that they were discussing emancipation, that they wanted to free the slaves. But the conversations weren't about freeing the slaves, or at least that wasn't the main reason for meeting. It wasn't about freeing the slaves. Anyway, after the meeting, there was no emancipation announced and no emancipation was going to happen. And this made a lot of people angry. Now, in 1816, sorry, not 1831, 1816, from the 14th of April to the 16th of April, 1816, this man, Bussa, led one of the largest in the Caribbean. It was the largest in Barbados. Revolt. He led the largest revolt. There were about 300 other slaves that joined him. 300. And these people decided that they were going to fight. They were not going to allow the British to just decide their fate anymore. The British, they were not going to wait for them to have meetings and then say, oh, well, you get to be freed. No, you don't get to be freed. You are going to be shipped from Barbados to Jamaica and we're going to use you there. No, they decided they were going to take matters into their own hands and fight for their freedom. Now, when you read about wars and about rebellions, one of the things that always stands out, to me at least, is that the person who is planning the wars many times is not involved in the war or in the rebellion. Very many times that has happened a lot. So I plan a rebellion, I say, we should fight, we should fight, we should go, burn them, yeah! And then I stand still in one place, and the rest of the people who were shouting with me rush to their deaths and they die. Right? That's usually how it happens. And we saw something very similar in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement, where the founders themselves, one of them made millions of dollars and went and bought a very rich house in an over 90% white neighborhood. Meanwhile, the rest of the people were marching on the streets, looting places, burning things, destroying communities, right? And the person who stood and gave the marching orders wasn't even involved, did not even believe it enough to allow it to affect her in any way negative. You should Google this, right? But in this case, in the case of Bussa wasn't just saying stuff. As somebody who himself was a slave in real slavery, not just playing victim mentality or imagining situations or feeling hurt and in pain and emotionally oppressed. No, that's not what we're talking about. Today when we talk about a lot of abuse today, I'm not trying to knock down these things, right? But many times when we talk about abuse, the majority of the people who are talking about abuse, what they mean is simply, I don't like this. And once you don't like something, you label it abuse, right? So an exam is coming up. It's very hard. You have to study because there are complex things that are going to be asked of you in the exam. You know this. And then you start talking about all sorts of colonization and oppressive regime and anxiety and all sorts of, just because you don't know how to read and write an exam. You're now blaming it on colonization. Colonization made school to be oppressive to Black people. Many times when people are talking about oppression and slavery and colonization and all of that, they just mean, I don't like this. But if you look at history and you see where the original terms came from, let me tell you something in Barbados. And I think that because Barbados has gone through this, and because very many people in Barbados are just grandchildren or at most great-grandchildren of real human beings who experience these things firsthand. When Bajans want to talk about something, they go right to the point. Like they're not trying to play victim mentality about certain things. They tell you exactly what is being done wrong and exactly what justice looks like in that situation. It's not just about crying and crying. No, you have done this and this and this wrong. This is the right thing that was supposed to happen, and this is how we should move on and correct it. And that is one of the reasons why I like Barbados. Now, I've lived in a different Caribbean country. I've looked at different people from other Caribbean countries, and I've seen how they think. And in many of my past videos, I have attributed a lot of the progress of Barbados, if not the entire progress of Barbados, to its literacy rate. 99.9%, and by some estimates, 100% literacy rate in Barbados. Which means if you meet anybody who is around 15 years old, that person knows how to read and write and communicate. Every single person of about 15 years old in Barbados, that is the estimate, can read, can write, can speak English. And I've said this thing many times on this channel. And I think that is part of what contributes to a nation that isn't focused on playing victim mentality, but is focused on solving real problems that real people have. And so when people have mental problems, those people are really addressed. When people have emotional problems, those people are really addressed. The problem is really solved. When people have physical problems, when there is discrimination, undue discrimination, that problem is really solved. And we are not wasting time pandering to people that have victim mentality and trying to massage egos and massage emotional mess that some people are not willing to take responsibility about. And I think that is the big difference. The moment we start looking at real problems, we will solve them. But if we are going to waste a lot of time talking about non-existent problems that we have created for ourselves and written multiple books about, that is when we are going to have problems. Now, let me tell you one real problem that was in Barbados. I guarantee you have never heard of this. Or maybe you have. Maybe they teach it in schools in Barbados. I don't know. But I didn't school in Barbados. I didn't grow up in Barbados. So if you're like me and you're watching this from outside Barbados and you didn't school in Barbados, I want to read for you the most heinous crime of all the crimes committed under the earth. This one is a crime against God himself. And it was committed in Barbados during the period where a lot of people were brought in as slaves, during the period that the great, right excellent Bussa lived. What is this crime I speak of? It is called the Barbados Slave Code. Before you read this document or anything about this code, I'm going to tell you about it now, but if you want to go and read it by yourself, let me give you a little bit of disclaimer. Before you read this document, I want you to be seated. I want you to have a very strong energy drink. I want you to also be playing calming classical music in the background, because as you read this document, your blood will boil to volcanic levels. I'm not even exaggerating. Let me tell you some of the things that were in this document. This is a real law that was enacted by the parliament in Barbados, right? Not the current government. I mean, when the British were ruling, right? Not the current government, obviously. When the British were ruling, this was a real law. They didn't just do it informally or talk about it. They enacted it as law. Okay, let me read it for you. One of the things that was under this law was that you couldn't bring any kind of harm whatsoever to a white person. So, imagine this. You're walking on the streets, somebody pushes you, starts attacking you, whatever, and then you're trying to stand up, maybe you push him. You have harmed him. you have harmed this guy that has been beating you. And because you have harmed him, or as the law says, you have inflicted violence against a white person, you can be severely whipped. You can have your nose slit. They will use a knife and slit your nose. You can have your face burnt. They can take hot iron and put it on your face and give you a permanent, painful scar on your face. That can happen. Any one of these can happen for your first offense. Now, what do you think happens when you commit a second offense? Punished by death. Punished by death. Now, why do you think that human beings thought that it was wise to enact this kind of law against another human being created in the image and likeness of God? Why do you think? You think because they were just wicked people and they were demonic people and all of that? No. No. That would make them angels. If they're wicked, well, they're just wicked human beings. If they're demonic, well, they're just demons. The people who wrote this code were significantly worse than demons because, as part of the code, they wrote something else. They wrote something else. They said that the people who were brought as slaves were goods and chattels. They were what? They were goods and they were chattels, which means if you have a horse, your horse has equal rights as a slave. In fact, because your horse is a living animal, your horse has more rights than a slave, which is just a piece of good. So in reality, your slave and your bicycle have the same rights. That is the beauty of I'm calling it beautiful because you have to be intrinsically diabolically motivated to write such a thing. So, in other words, you are not doing anything against the image and likeness of God. You're not doing anything against somebody who has human dignity. You're not doing anything against a human, not even a homeless human being or a poor human being or whatever. No. This is not even a human being. This is not even humanoid. This is goods and chattels. This is your bicycle, your cart, your laundry basket, your curtains, your dishwasher, it's just some other stuff you bought. And that is why the Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, has talked about this a lot of times in her speeches. And that is why I think the Barbados Slave Code, by the way, I'm calling it the Barbados Slave Code of 1661, but that is the abbreviation of the name. Do you know what the real name was? It was called An Act for the Better Ordering and Governing of Negroes. An Act for the Better Ordering and Governing of Negroes. And I think that is why the Barbados Slave Code is arguably the worst version of slavery I have ever seen in the entire world. Now, if you looked at the slavery that was happening in Africa, right? There were different reasons why people were taken as slaves. You go to war, you conquer the people, you take their men as slaves, their women as wives, and their children as future wives or slaves, depending on whether they are boys or girls. The men are going to do a lot of hard work for you. The women are going to give birth to children, which will grow your kingdom, which will make your kingdom strong again for the next war, and so on and so forth. You recognize that these people are still human beings, but you know that you are superior in military might and strategy. And so you are taking advantage of that. There is another kind of slavery that was happening in Africa where you believe that these people are cursed. So this was what used to happen before. When people had slaves, sometimes, right? They would take this slave to a shrine in African tradition, and they would do a ritual on the slave and say, if anything wants to happen to me or my family, let it fall upon this slave and this slave's family instead. And they would complete the sacrifice and kill chickens and spray the blood and all of those things. You've watched the movies. And then they would leave this slave. That slave will then become an outcast. He will technically not be a slave. Well, technically he's still a slave, sort of. But he's going to live as if he's a free man, right? There were only two things, generally two main things. One, the slave had become an outcast, which means, and he was also inferior to the non-outcast. So any slave, any outcast, no matter how old you are, if you're 50 years old, if you're 70 years old, if you're 40 years old, no matter how old or whatever you are, if a non-outcast gives you a direct command, you must obey it, right? Because he's your superior. He's a superior human being. He hasn't been cursed by the gods, right? So he gives you a command, you obey it. If you don't obey it, you can get in serious trouble. So if you're walking down a street and a non-outcast is coming and you see him, you have to move. You don't contest the road with him. You move out of the way. Whether he's a small boy or 15 years old, he's still your superior, right? And obviously, you cannot intermarry. Outcasts cannot intermarry with non-outcasts. But here's the interesting thing. These were human beings cursed by the gods, according to tradition, right? Human beings cursed by the gods. And you look at this thing among the Vikings, among the Indians, among the South Americans, among the Africans, different parts of the world. They had all these different reasons and justifications why they should take slaves and why they should treat them horribly and all that. But this is the first time I am reading that a group of people came together and said, these people are in fact not people. They are goods and chattel. They are goods and chattel. These goods and chattel did not have any human rights. None. Not even the most foundational, the most basic, the right to life. At any point in time, your owner, that's why they were called slave owners. They own you. You see the way you go and you buy a piece of watch? You buy a watch and you own the watch. You buy a book and you own the book. You buy a camera and you own the camera. They owned the human beings. So at any time, your owner can kill you. Just like that. Nothing will happen. Your owner can tattoo your body, flog you. There are some things that if I say on this channel, YouTube is going to demonetize my channel, delete the channel, throw me in jail, lock the keys, throw the keys in the middle of the ocean. If you read History of Barbados and you go on the street and you see people smiling, you say God is good. Because personally, I've said this thing to my friends many times. Personally, I don't think I could have lived in the olden days. I would have been starting wars every single day. I would have been dead in the first 15 minutes. If you ever build a time machine and you send me back in time, I will be dead in 15 minutes because of the things I would do. It's horrible, the kind of life they live. Very horrible. But anyway, our man Bussa led the rebellion. And he personally fought in the rebellion, fighting for human freedom, fighting for what he believed, fighting for common sense. And the British were scared. And they sent reinforcements, and they sent in the military, and they killed a whole lot of people, including Bussa himself. But that was the first of what would later be known as the 3 mass slave rebellions in the British West Indies that finally led to the abolition of slavery by the British Empire. That one happened in 1816. And then there was another one in the Damerara Rebellion that was around in Guyana, I think. Yeah, Guyana in 1823. So just like 7 years later. Then there was another one called the Baptist War in Jamaica. That one was between 1831 to 1833. 1831 to 1833. to 1832. Yes. And then it was about a year later, after that final one, that it was eradicated. So, when you listen to this story, there are two things that you can take away from it. One of them, these are not the things you should take away from it, but I'm saying these are the things you can take away from it. I'll tell you the one you should take away from it. Okay, let me tell you the wrong ideas. One of them is to just think, boy, the British people real wicked. All white people real wicked. No. I have said this on this channel many times. This is not a skin color issue. It is a human issue. When you have wicked people who have unrestricted access to every device that they can use in their advantage, those wicked people maximize their evil. Those wicked people maximize their evil. However, it doesn't matter whether those wicked people are white or black or Indian or Chinese or Mexican or whatever. If they are wicked, they will maximize their evil. Now, I will give you a very good example of this. I've talked about the African slaves a lot. And because this channel is called Barbados Walker, I concentrate a lot of my conversation on Barbados, the Caribbean, and Africa because I'm from Nigeria. But if you want to see what happens when somebody maximizes evil, go and look at what Japan was doing in the East. Today, Japan is known for, J-pop, anime, the nice table tennis, and all these nice kawaii thing. You watch anime and you're like, wow, these people have strong morals and they have... It's all rebranding. That's okay. I'm happy for how far they've come. But if you want to see how far human wickedness can go, look at what was happening in Japan. If you want to see how far human wickedness can go, look at the human sacrifices that were happening in Mexico. They were taking they were stealing human beings. I don't want to use the real word. I don't know what YouTube is going to do. In fact, I've said enough. YouTube will probably take this video down. If you're watching this video, please subscribe and like so YouTube knows that it's a good video and we're just talking about beautiful emancipation and nothing scary in the video. But anyway, look at what Mexico was doing. They were taking people without their consent, if you know what I mean, and murdering them, spilling their blood across steps to some god that they were worshipping. Thousands and thousands of human beings as a normal routine. So why do I say that? I say that to say this. Wickedness is a problem with the fallen human soul. It's not a problem with your skin color. That means if you're a white person and you go out in the sun and you tan and you do that long enough and you become significantly darker than you were at the beginning of the year, you're still going to have the same character inside you if you don't do anything to change it. If you're a black person and you go on bleach and now you look like Michael Jackson after the surgery, you're still going to have the same character. It's not going to... Your skin color has nothing to do with your character and your morals. So when you listen to this, don't think this color of human beings or the white people were wicked for this or the Africans were wicked for this, for selling their own brothers and sisters to the Europeans. No, think human wickedness is evil, and anywhere we see it, whether with people of our own race or people from a different race or the same creed or a different creed or the same ethnicity, different nationality, whatever, we should quash it before it becomes something that we cannot control anymore. Before some mind-blowingly idiotic human being, diabolical nonentity, gets into power and decides that human beings are nothing more than goods and chattels. It starts from small, right? It starts from when people are saying stupid stuff and nobody corrects them. And then they get into government and they enact stupid stuff into law. Okay? So, what is the second thing that you should not get away? You should not take out of this video. The second thing is victim mentality. There's a friend of mine, I'm not going to mention his name because he's going to watch this video, probably. But I've told him this many times. Whenever I speak with him about stuff like this, topics like this, or, Trump in the United States and Barack Obama and Biden and whatever is going on in Nigeria with Tinubu and Buhari before him and all the different things and all of that, corruption, you know how it is with politics. Whenever we have political conversations, this boy ends the conversation with, and that is why we can never make progress, because the white man has cheated us or has done so much evil to us and all of that. And I always hate that. I hate conclusions like that, because you're telling me that something that people did at least 200 years ago, about 200 years ago, your father wasn't born, you weren't born, you've never even met them. 99% of the laws that they enacted that were racist, if not 100%, depending on the country that you're in, 100% of those laws have been eradicated, changed. You now live in a free and fair, democratically elected state, or at least something close to that. You have access to the internet. You have access to books. You have access to podcasts, to this wonderful YouTube channel called Barbados Walker that everybody has been talking about and they're saying you should subscribe to. You have access to all these resources. And instead of you to use that to better yourself, to improve, to learn, to make progress for yourself, your family, and your immediate community, you have decided that it is impossible for you to make any progress in your academics, in your finances, in your relationships, because some dead white men did something to your great-great-great-grandfather. And this is assuming that they did something to your father, and it wasn't your father that did something to another person. Because as we've seen many times on this channel, Africans had slaves. Black people in the United States had slaves. Right? So what makes you think that you descended from the slaves and you didn't descend from the enslavers? And instead of you to focus on building something, which is where Barbados is headed. I love Barbados. If you listen to politicians in Barbados talk, when they give speeches, when they do their community gatherings and stuff like that, you hear people ask questions that are meant to move the country forward, and you hear the politicians respond with answers that are meant to move the community forward. I cannot say the same about many communities in the United States, where when they gather, when important people gather, they are gathering to complain and to say how it is impossible for us to make any progress because everything is racist. And yet, in their communities, you have people that will succeed and live the community because they don't want to have that same victim mentality. Focus on real problems. A lot of people hate it when I talk like this. I have friends that say that, you're not validating the problems that many people have. They have real problems that they're facing, and yeah, solve the real problems. How about that? How about solve the real problems and not complain about them? So I don't want you to get this victim mentality, because honestly speaking, if you look at the comment section of any of my videos, you will see that 99.9% are sane people. Sane. They have brain cells. They ask reasonable questions. And you might be wondering why. Because I don't have time for people who complain. I don't have time. I grew up in Nigeria. You read about Nigeria in the news. I grew up in northern Nigeria, Borno State specifically, where Boko Haram started. I grew up there. I know the sound of bombs. You have probably only heard bombs in TV. I know the sound of guns and bombs. Do you know what it sounds like when a bomb goes off? It's not just boom, ta-ta-ta, boom. No, it shakes your house a bit. And it's not even close. It's like 5 kilometers away, but your house vibrates. That's how huge the bombs are. Doom. And your heart sinks, and you don't know when they're going to break into your region. You don't know what's going to happen next. And we were there for a while until we had to move out for safety. Real problems. Now imagine if I come on this show one day and I say, oh, well, growing up in Nigeria, there was so much corruption, and there was so much corruption and tribalism because I was from southeastern Nigeria. I was from the Igbo tribe, and I grew up in the northern parts of Nigeria, Hausa tribe. And if you know about Nigeria, we have a lot of tribalism between the tribes because it's like racism, but not based on skin color. It's based on tribe. And we used to struggle. And then later on, as I was just becoming a teenager, we had this Boko Haram terrorist group that started, like shooting people and killing people. And they even took a couple of people from my school and from my neighborhood. And I knew people who then left and joined those terrorist groups. And then there was so much violence and so much crime, and that's why I cannot move forward. How many of you are then going to have a GoFundMe ready for me so that I can, sit in my scared little cocoon complaining about it? Do you know what the answer is going to be? None. I will still have to stand up in the morning tomorrow, do my business, pay my rent, pay my light bill, get food, get transportation, all of that. I still have to do that. You still have to do that. So which one is more beneficial? Complain about stuff or get stuff done? Get stuff done. When I read the story of Bussa, I see the difference between being enslaved for decades. Now, I don't want to sound very insensitive, right? But the pictures we saw said that the transatlantic slave trade started in the 15th century. 15th century and ended in 19th century. That is at least about 400 years. Slave trade from Africa to the Americas was between 1650 to 1860. That is like 210 years. For that long, a lot of people were just waking up in the morning, accepting their situation, and going back to sleep in the night. Nobody thought. Nobody mobilized. Nobody fought. Nobody did. Now, there were many small like riots and stuff and rebellions and stuff. But it took crazy people. Like when I say crazy, I mean people who weren't counting, who weren't thinking, oh, this might not be safe. It might be easier to just sit down and do what you're told or whatever. It took people who weren't willing to just follow the norm, the status quo of sitting and standing and complaining or whatever. People who were going to take matters into their own hands and fight for what they believed and build the community that they wanted, to finally lead to it toppling over. I want to ask a question, and I know you already know the answer. If Bussa had led this rebellion and died in the rebellion, and the people that rebelled with him died, and there wasn't another one, do you think slavery would have been abolished? Do you think that people who were benefiting from slaves would have voluntarily abolished slavery? Sometimes you don't realize that you have to make things uncomfortable for yourself and for everyone around you for progress to be made. You don't realize that, but that's the truth. That's just the truth. If you're struggling with something financially right now, have you considered that maybe you wake up every morning and you go to the same job at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever, and you come back at 5 p.m. and then you complain? Have you considered that that might be the reason? Have you considered that maybe you should try to learn something else? I say that all the time on this channel. Try to do something else. Do it. Just do. That's Nike's slogan. I don't know if I can say that, but just do it. Just do it. Just motivate yourself. What are you struggling with? Are you struggling with your faith? How about pick up a Bible, read it, go to church, cut off your bad influences. Don't just keep saying, well, I struggle. I just struggle with drinking alcohol and rum, and it tastes real nice, and I really have this struggle, man. And why are you telling me you're going to a club on Friday, then come back on Saturday and tell me your real struggle with rum? How about don't go on Friday and not complain on Saturday? How about that? How about that? But business is real slow. Business is real slow. But we're having this conversation on the beach. Business is real slow. How do you have time for the beach? You're struggling to pay rent and you have time for the beach. How about you do something about it? How about that? Oh, the government this, the government that. But I ask you how you voted and you say, well, I don't really believe in voting and what will happen. I just take things as they come. You just take things as they come. You don't believe in voting, but you're out here complaining about the government. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Bussa is my number one man in Barbados. Bussa is my number one man in Barbados. Because I think me and Bussa think alike. And I actually believe he's an Igbo man because me too, I'm an Igbo man. And that is how Igbo people think. When there is a problem, you people you've watched documentaries about Nigerians. Very resilient. Nigerians aren't always known for being resilient in the right things, admittedly, right? Resilient in crime, resilient in corruption, but also resilient in education, in business, in, good things. What is there is the resilience. Resilience. Right? You need to have this mindset that tells you, I will stand up in the morning and I will demand of myself effort towards the goal I am trying to achieve. And if I achieve that goal, thanks be to God. But if I don't achieve that goal, I know that I put in blood, sweat, and tears. I wasn't lying down by the side of the road and said, oh, woe is me, ay. No. I know that I fought. I know that I gave it my all. So that on the last day when I go upstairs and I'm being asked, what did you do with the things I gave you? I will not be saying things like, oh, well, God, business real slow and the economy real bad and the prime minister, well, she will do the things that we want to do and, there's nothing I could do and I just one man, what could I do? No. I'll say, Lord, you gave me one talent. You teach me how to talk, how to imitate people's accent. And man, I didn't know what to do. So I went on YouTube. I did on YouTube and I just talking. And eventually that led me somewhere and I built a business and I did some content and I then opened another business and I got some education. And then after that, I unfortunately or fortunately, I now decided to make an unserious YouTube called Barbados Walker, where I just talk about other stuff that are unrelated to anything in particular, but the fact that I'm living here. All right. At least I should be able to say something to God. I should be able to tell God, I did something. And because I did something, something happened. Something happened. So, what should you take away from emancipation? What should you take away from Bussa? What should you take away from freedom-fighting rebellious individuals who eventually won their freedom? One thing. He has placed before you fire and water, life and death, failure and success, good and bad, right and wrong. Everything you need in life is right in front of you. You can take it or you can complain about it. But one thing is for sure, you will not get results if you do not put in the work. I don't care where you are right now. If you're in secondary school, if you're in the United States, if you're in Nigeria, if you're in Kenya, if you're in Pakistan, if you're in India, if you're in Mexico, if you're in Brazil, if you're in Estonia, if you're in Sweden, I don't care. You are 15 years old, you are 30 years old, you are 50 years old, you are 75 years old. I don't care. You have one life and a whole bunch of decisions you can make to either improve that one life or destroy that one life. It's eventually going to come on you. And even if you need help from other people, you are still the one that has to figure out how to convince those people to help you. It's on you. You have to learn public speaking. You have to learn body language. You have to learn persuasion. You have to learn influence. You have to read books. Even if you need help, it's still on you. You think Bussa just woke up one day and he had 300 people willing to go and fight and die for him? You think that is how it happened? No. He had to show that he was someone people could follow into battle. It was on him to prove it. And he made himself a distinguished gentleman. The right excellent Bussa. Oh, he was that long before he was given that title in Barbados. He made that. And then when that happened, we saw the result. We didn't see the hard work. We didn't see the late nights. We didn't see the meetings they were having. Oh, they had multiple meetings. I didn't even get to that story. They had multiple meetings in secret, planning this. We didn't see that. All we saw was the end result. We are living the end result. Barbados exists as a sane country with 100% literacy rate today because somebody was insane enough to fight for what he believed. You will not get results if you do not fight for them. This is arguably one of the saddest and most depressing episodes I've ever done on this channel. I promise you this channel is usually not like this. People in the comment section know that this channel is usually not like this. But it is part of our history. I say our because, well, a part of this started in Africa, so technically we are all in this together. So it is part of our history. It is part of the history of the world, which we all share. And on a Barbados-specific channel a few days after emancipation, it is good to remind people about the spirit of Bajans, the spirit of resilience, the spirit of justice-seeking focus, so that we never forget that. We never forget what we have. Because, as the saying goes, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Thank you very much for watching this video. And for you in the comments section that essentially threatened me to start posting videos again, this episode is for you, and every other episode is also going to be for all of you who have been telling me to post more. I'm talking to you, Kennedy. I'm talking to you, Victoria. I'm talking to you who commented yesterday in the comment section telling me I should post, that I'm not posting. I'm doing my business. I cannot post every day. But okay, I promise you guys, This August, I'm going to post more often. In fact, let me make a commitment now. I promise you at least 3 videos every week this August. And if you try me, I'll give you a video every day. If you try me, I'll give you a video every day. All right. Thank you very much for subscribing. Our subscribers have grown about 100 more people since the last time I was here. And we're about to reach 25. Can we reach 3,000? Can we reach 3,000 soon? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Let's keep posting. We are headed for 10,000. We'll soon get there. Thank you again. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.